Daf Samach Dalet Amud Beis, the beginning of the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ein Pesach Nishchat Ela B'Sholosh Kitos Shel Shloshim B'nei Adam. The Korban Pesach is only shechted if there's three groups, and each group has a minimum of 30 people. My time, what's the reason? Because the pasuk says, "Kal ve'edav Yisrael." It says in the pasuk these three groups. It says the Korban Pesach should be shechted, and it should be shechted v'shachadaisa kol kal adas Yisrael. So you have the three groups. Now each group has to have at least 10 people. Now we know that each of these groups, that we know that an Eda has to have 10 people. Each of these groups have to have 10 people. Now we have a suffix. Does that mean that there are 3 sets of 10 people, or there's 30 people at one time? So we have a suffix. Do they have to be dafka 3 different times, 3 different intervals, 3 different groups? Or is the point that it has to be a total of 30 people? So therefore, what we must do is hilkach binan sholosh kitayis shel shleishim b'nei adam. Therefore, we divide it into 3 groups, because in case we have to have 3 groups, it's divided into 3. And each group has to have at least 30 people. That way, you yotze both sides of the suffix. If it's to be 30 people, then you have 30 people, because each group has 30 people. And if it's meant to be one after the other, you've also satisfied it, because you have 3 different groups. Therefore, theoretically, you only need 50 people. How is that? Involved. First, one group of 30 comes in, and they mark to the korban. So you have a group of 30 people. Then the second group, 10 come in, and 10 from the first group go out. Again, you had 30 people, and you have a second group. And then, third group, 10 come in, 10 go out. Again, you have 3 groups and 30 people in each group. The first group came in, they entered the Azor. It was filled up, and the gates were closed. Itmar Abai Amar Ninolutana. Abaya says that the girsa is ninol. They were closed, meaning they closed on their own, with an ace, through an ace. Rava Amar Noalim Tanan. Rava says they closed the gates, not through an ace. My beinayu, what's the chilek between them? Do we rely on an ace? Abaya Amar Nin Alu Tanan. He says that Nin Alu Kamad Ayla Malam Samprina Nisa. Let as many people come in as they can come in, that can accommodate. And then we're Samach on the nays, and that the gates would close on their own when it was full. Rav Amar and Noelim Tanan, Rav says, no, they close the gates, the people close the gates, Veloy Samchinen Anisa. We don't rely on a miracle, we don't rely on a nays. It's a little bit difficult. The bias says we rely on nays. We have a klal in Simchan al nays. So why over here should we rely on the nays? Perhaps the pshat is that in Simchan al nays, if it's a matter of a sakana, you can't rely on the nays. If it's a matter of relying on a halacha, you can't be samech on the nays. So, for instance, by Yuma, it says in Mafrishan Kohen Gadol, we took all the precautions for the Kohen Gadol, and so that he would not become Tomei for Yom Kippur, even though it was one of the Nisim that the Kohen Gadol never became Tomei. We're not Saimech on an Nes when it's Nagea Sakana, when it's Nagea Halacha, but over here, it's more of a practical matter. That the Nes, we can rely on the Nes. If the gates don't close, and for some reason the Nes doesn't happen, then we can close the gates. But the consequence of relying on an ace is not severe. So over here, Abai says we do rely on an ace. Maybe that's the pshat. Practicing more of a hadith, and then we learn in the Mishnah, ben Mahalal Nisnada. So there's an issue over there. Do we say that he was put in hair? So they had in the Mishnah in Eiduyas is with Shiloh whether he showed disrespect to the Chachamim, was put in cherem or not. So this opinion over here holds that Rabbi Yehuda says that Chas v'Shalom that he was put in cher. The person of his stature could not have been put in cherem. She'ein azor nenelas al kol adam Yisrael. The doors of the Azor did not close. When they closed, when everybody came into the Azora and the doors closed, there was nobody there in the Azora as great as him. To ein azor nezal kol adam Yisrael b'chochma v'yiras chet kavim min halol. So nobody was great as he. So it couldn't have been that he was put in a cherem. But here we're talking about the closing of the gate. So Abai metaretz l'tamei v'rov metaretz l'tamei. Abai l'taretz l'tamei, he interprets it according to his pshat. Ein ba'azora b'shas sheninal al kol adam Yisrael. No one was in the Azor when the gates closed on their own. B'neis, no one was great as him. B'chach b'yiras chet k'kavei ben mahalola. And Rav Metaretz l'tamei ein ba'azor b'shas shenoelim. When they closed the gates, b'shas shenoelim also kol Yisrael. Even though there were so many people in the Azor, it was so packed with people, but no one was ever crushed in the Azor, except for 1 year by Pesach. B'mei was at the time of Hila, when one old man was crushed, and they called it the crushed Pesach. Ton Rabbanan Pamachas Bikesh Agrivas Amount Litenina Bachluchse Yisrael. He wanted to count the Yid. Amr Leila Kain Gadol said to the Kain Gadol, Teinenecha Bipsachim. See how many Korban Pesachim there are, and there will be able to therefore count the Yid. Not a Kulia Mikol Echad. He took a kidney from each one of the Korban Pesach. Benimsu Sham Shishim Ribay Kiloyas. And they had 600,000 pairs of kidneys. Kiflaim ki Yotzei Mitzrayim, double the amount of Yotzei Mitzrayim. And that doesn't include Chutz Mitomei Ushai B'derech Chaika. That doesn't include those people that did not bring the Korban Pesach. There's even more than that. Ve'en l'chol Pesach, and there was no Korban Pesach, not even one Pesach. Shalei Nimna Lav Yotzei Masor B'nei Aram. That did not have more than 10 people that were Nimna with it. V'ayokar Noisa Pesach Mu'uchen. They called it the Muchen, the thick, the crushed Pesach, packed Pesach. What do you mean he took a kidney, not al kulya, how can he take the kidney? They have to be makter on the Mizbech. It's one of the Emurim. More answers to Hadar Makter. Well, they took it, they counted it, and then they put it back, and they put it on the Mizbech, and they burnt it. How could they do that still? You should burn it. Each one should be burnt on its own. Therefore, you can't just take all of them and burn them together. You can't collect them, count them, and then burn them all together. More answers means that afterwards they counted it and then they burnt each one separately. Frankly, more still, Tanya, we learned the Bryce that all of the Emurim should be together. So they can't just be makter the kidney. Even if it's separate kidneys, they have to be makter the Emurim all together. Ella, the Gemara says, what did they do? He just temporarily took the kidney, and therefore the person who was in charge and helping with the counting, then they took a kidney. They took, Rashi says, for example, a bean that represented that one kidney, and then right away they put the kidney back and they were makter on the Mizbeach. The Shagl Minayu, the Yovel Midachvina, until the one that was in charge of the counting until they gave him something else, until they replaced it with something else, and then they were makter on the Mizbeach. Kahanim oimdim shura is the Kahanim stood in lines and had one line of gold where all of the bowls were gold and the other one silver. They didn't mix it together. My time, what is that? Why is the reason that they didn't mix it? Maybe you'll say, because a person might take an empty bowl of gold, and replace it with a silver one. Maybe the ones that they brought back were gold, and if the lines were mixed, maybe the one that was being bought forward with silver. And therefore we would have a problem of mal and meridim. And so therefore you can't replace the gold one with the silver one. So hachanami, well, even if they're all gold or all silver, but they're all weren't the same, on the same size and the same value, Here also, even if you have all gold and silver, maybe it'll take a bowl worth 200 and replace it with one of only 100. So what's the pshat? Why didn't they mix the lines? They were kept separate because it looked more beautiful not to have it mixed up in a hodgepodge. They had a line of gold and a line of silver. It was more beautiful to do it that way. The bowls didn't have bases so that the blood did not congeal. All of the bezil, bowls didn't have bottoms, except levina v'lechem apanim, because that shema yanichem v'yifras halechem, because we're afraid that if he would not have a base, maybe he'll place them against the loaves. They have to rest on something. Maybe he'll lean it against the bread, and it will break the bread. So therefore, they have to have a base so that they could rest on their own, not leaning against the lechem. The lechem upon him had two sides, and it was delicate, and it had two sides that if you would lean on it, it might break it. Therefore, the bezichin did have a base. Shochan Yisrael l'kibul kayin, the Yid Yisrael shechted it and give it to a kain. Why does it specify Yisrael? A kain can't do shchita? Certainly a kain can do the shchita. Our answer is he gufa kamashum the shchita bazar ksheira. Yes, he can, but I want to tell you the chiddush that shchita bazar is ksheira. The kibul kayin, and the kain does the kabbalah sadam hakamash malan mikabbalah ve'elach mitzvahs kahuna. It stresses that the kibul kayin to tell you that from this point on, from kabbalah and onwards, it must be done with a kayin. So he gives it to his friend, he hands it to his friend. Can we make a deal from here that halacha shalei b'regel havi halacha? What says they pass it forward? Now there's a mitzvah, one of the avodas halacha, bringing it, taking it to the mizbeach. Can we infer from here that halacha shalei b'regel, even though they don't walk, they just hand it to each other, that constitutes halacha and your yaitza, the mitzvah, the avodah of halacha in that way? Where it says, no, you cannot make a dik, because Dilma, who nayat porta. Maybe the kohen moves just a little bit before handing it off. He moves his body, he steps forward a little bit. So what's the chiddush? What's the telling us by this that he passes? What's the chiddush? What are we learning out from there? If you're not going to learn out this halacha, bishlam, if you tell me you want to learn out the halacha shlei b'regas shmei halacha, I understand why it was telling me that they conveyed it like, so to speak, on a conveyor belt. But otherwise, what's the chiddush here? What's he teaching me? Akamash malan baravam hadras melach. That baravam asraf, the more kohanim you have involved with it, the more people, the greater the multitude, it's a bigger covet. So davka, therefore, they did it in this way, to teach me in this way, not that to tell me that, to teach, that to learn out that halacha shaloi b'regas halacha, but the roivam hadras melach. He would accept the full bowl and then return the other one. He would accept the full one and return the other. But he didn't do it the opposite way. He didn't first return the empty one and then accept the full one. It's a right of Shimon Lakish, the Hamar of Shimon Lakish, ain't mavir al mitzvahs. We don't pass over a mitzvah. So therefore, if he has the opportunity to facilitate the mitzvah of Zrikas Adam, first he accepts the full one and passing it forward to facilitate the mitzvah Zrika. Then he returns the empty one, which will facilitate the future mitzvah, but it's not being now, you're not being Isaac in that mitzvah right now. So first thing is Isaac is the mitzvah of the Zrikas Adam. Kain HaKaravetz Mizbeach, so the Kain that's closest to the Mizbeach, he does the Zrika. Man Tana Pesach B'Zrika, who was the Tana that taught that the Korban Pesach is done through Zrika? You do Zrika, then you don't do a Shvicha, but you throw it. You throw it, you don't gently pour it, you throw it. Omar Rav Chisda, Rabbi Yosei Galili. It's Rabbi Yosei Galili. The son of Rabbi Yosei Galili, Aimer, es Damam Tizrak, Al Mizbeach, Ves Chalbam, Takt. It says you throw the dam on the mizbeach and the chelbam, you're makter. You burn the chelav. Dama loy nemar. It doesn't say damoy. It says ela damam. It says damam, theirs, in the plural. So it says it in the plural, and chelboy loy nemar. It doesn't say it's chelev ela chelbon. It also says in the plural. So this is talking about the korban of the bechor, when you makriv the bechor. But it says it in the plural, which means that we're marba another korban as well. Limin al bechor u'maiser pesach. So it tells you bechor maiser pesach, which are similar type of korbanos. It tells you these type of korbanos also that shehem teunim matan damim v'murm legam mizbeach, that they also require, like the bechor, matan damim murm legam mizbeach. And how do we know that the tzrik has to be above the part of the mizbeach where there's a yisoid, a base? We learn out Gzeir Shava, Zrika from Oila. It says, Ksiv Hach over here, it says, as Damam Tizrak al Mizbeach. It says you do the Zrik on the Mizbeach. Or Ksiv Hach, when it says, the Gabi the Oila, Vizarku b'nei Arna Kames Damai al Mizbeach Soviv. It also says al Mizbeach. Ma Oila Te'una Yisoid, just like the Oila requires the Yisoid, as we'll see shortly, a Pesach Nami Ta'on Yisoid. Pesach also needs the oil gufa minolan, and where do we know it? Even by the oil itself, how do we know that? Amar kra el yisoid mizbach ha'oila. It says the base of the mizbach ha'oila. Alma oila tuna yisoid. So the oila needs a yisoid, and therefore we learn out from there.